Good afternoon. Welcome to Match Day. I'm Vince Gansberg. We have Ian Barker with us, and we have Ian Mullliner, who's usually our TGIF guest, but he's making a special appearance this week to help me out. Our special guest is Scott Snyder from AYSO. He's the Director of Sport and Development. Scott, can you say hello just to make sure we have audio? Uh-oh.
Oh, he's doing one of them.
You might have to reboot the room.
I'll reboot the room one more time. So stay with us, our attendees, and we'll reboot one more time.
Yep. Okay, Scott, can we hear you?
I can hear you perfectly.
Perfect. Mully, can we hear you?
You can.
Yes, we can. And Mr. Barker, can we hear you?
Yeah, we're good. Thank you.
Perfect. Well, thanks, everybody, for that. And again, welcome, Scott. Scott is from AYSO. He's the Director of Sport and Development. He also does, a lot of work with U.S. soccer. He is definitely one of the classiest individuals I've ever had a chance to meet and work with. He is a tremendous coaching educator and a tremendous leader for AYSO, I know. But Scott, thank you so much for taking time to join us today.
Thank you, Vince. That was a lovely introduction. I appreciate that.
Thank you. So, Scott, we talked a little bit, via email, right, about topics to discuss. And I think one thing that's kind of out there is, well, some of us are getting back, right, and we're going back to play. And so if you want, maybe we start off with that, and then we go from there. But before that, sorry, I'm going to back up. Let's just talk about your journey. Like, how did you get to where you are? How'd you get there?
To the kitchen.
I knew it.
Sorry, Molly. Painfully predictable. So, ex-player, played in Europe, came over here, played in the leagues leading up to the MLS, retired, started to get into coach education, came on with AYSO as a consultant in 2011, which is, I think, when we met, Vince, to basically rewrite and update the coaching curriculum in the organization. So took about 5 years to do that, and then joined full-time as Director of Programs and Education in 2017, and recently made a transition into Sport and Development, which is a kind of more holistic role in the organization. So similar to Ian, probably, in his long and lengthy journey. Maybe his is a little longer than mine. I'm not sure.
Yep. And then we have Mr. Mullliner, by the way, on, and I've asked Mr. Mullliner to come on as a special guest just to give you trouble, Scott. Yeah. And
well, I've had good workings with Ian. Ian and I have worked a few times with different study groups for US soccer, and got to know him and his approach to education and his innovation. So it's always good to see his smiling face, adding some color and humor to the event.
I hope this is being recorded after you said that, by the way.
It is. And it's going to be available, by the way, on YouTube. Thank you for that. And I know that we first met each other a little bit through Ches.
Yes.
Right? And working on the F license together.
That's right.
You gave some really good feedback for that. So let's talk about, return to play, where we're at now. You mentioned before that we went on live that California is just kind of opening, right?
I think it's interesting, right? The whole country's just decided we've had enough. It's time to open up again. So the challenge for us, of course, as being a nationwide entity, is trying to track each region and keep up to date with it in the different statuses and different phases. But generally speaking, Vince, we started planning for the return as soon as we recognized the crisis was so severe, and kind of approached it from three different areas, which was service to our volunteer members, and keeping people communicated and informed with updates, and from a health and safety standpoint to programming, and then eventually return to play. the foundation to all of that, I think, was the service part, because we realized that, if families are needing, the refunds from the youth soccer exploits, then things are pretty bad. So we mobilized the entire office team to help with proactively reaching out to every region and talking to them and finding out what they needed and giving them options in order to get them their money. And that was a really strong foundation, because it also layered into the second part, which was communication. And we managed to personally communicate messages. And now the excitement, of course, is time to get back to play. And that carries with it, of course, some other challenges, but nevertheless, we're well into that event as well, with different kind of initiatives to help engage the regions when they get back there.
Yeah, thank you. I'll let one of the two Ians ask the next question, if they have one.
So, Scott, I got one real quick, and then Molly, I'll turn to you. So, national programming, national programs coming from AYSO, national leadership, but obviously reaching into different states with different municipal and state guidelines. How have your members? Do your members play kind of not a game, but are they challenged between wanting to do your recommendations and then looking for a lesser recommendation and vice versa?
Yeah, at the end of the day, we provided guidelines, Ian. We provided guidelines and recommendations based on a variety of protocols. But at the end of the day, the local jurisdiction surpasses anything that we suggest, because it's so different, right? Whether it's and they're all at different stages as well. So we've generalized our approach, taken into consideration information from CDC, Federation, US Youth, yourselves, everybody who's experts within the field that have provided guidance on where you should be looking, what type of framework you should be providing. The interesting thing was the coaching piece. How do we provide information that's going to be relevant to such a diverse population at different stages of play? So what we basically did is you guys know Paul Bright and the coaching manual, who we have a partnership with, is we basically we started to look at the modified environment and what it could potentially look like. And we age brackets of 5 to 8, 9 to 12, and 13 plus. And rather than look at it in terms of themes or content, we decided to look at it as what are suitable activities from our current content and from global content that would line up for potentially a restricted environment. And when I say restricted environment, you're looking at less numbers, less contact, physical distancing. Those are kind of baselines. And we developed about 100 different activities at different stages that could be applied. And what we looked at is the activities and the makeup of the design themselves. And then all of a sudden it started to fall into categories of topics. Again, we didn't start with the topics to fill it in. We just decided what activities would work. So we found that topics started to develop, like, technique, of course, and isolation, but with the goal of some type of application to a game environment, passing, definitely, finishing, spatial awareness. So it lent those topics started to develop, and again we started to build this curriculum, and all of a sudden we've got these 3 different handbooks to supplement our coaches that provide good content and good ideas. But when we looked at them, they're not all perfect depending on where you're at in your reopening phase, right? Some may be a little too much, some might not be enough. So the key to it was to create modification guidelines. How do you go in and redesign that activity based on where you're at today? And that's what we've done as well. And that's been really well received by our volunteers, because it's not so much giving them a turnkey solution, it's empowering them to modify it to their own needs, to their own environment, which is what we've managed to do. It's been well received.
Fantastic.
Molly?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because I was always going to ask the same question, so I'm trying to gather my thoughts as Scott's responding, because he's covering a lot of bases. One of the things that's interesting to me, though, is you're terming it a return to play in Massachusetts, and certainly I think several states around us in New England. We can't even call it that. It's a return to soccer activities.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the physical distancing training session plans that you've put together.
Yeah.
I want to know what your thoughts are though on. For me, it's not about getting the children on the field and having coaches deal with the children there. It's about all of the prep work outside of the actual soccer that coaches are going to need to do.
Yeah.
So have we got that message out?
Yeah. So you're talking about the environment that we create before they even get on the field, right? And you're right. It's and that has to be looked at. We've certainly had to look at it from a safety and health perspective, right? And again, there's certain standardized. We'd come up with guidelines again early on with the potential that this was going to be pretty significant, but it relates to. Its process and how they get there, whether it's carpooling. Do you recommend it, which is a normal procedure for youth soccer? You don't for this particular time being. The equipment, how do they manage the equipment? Sharing of equipment, which is a norm. So all of the kind of things we take for granted and we looked at, we basically broke down the entire model, Ian, from when they leave the house to parking in the car park, to getting in the field, to returning. And we walked through that and provided, again, recommendations based on general guidelines, with the caveat that it's got to be whatever your local environment recommends and aligns. The other factor is, or the other variable becomes, despite our protocol, what are the parents comfortable with, and that's going to vary family to family. So, the face mask is a good example. It's not something that we recommend for the children when they're active, but we have recommended it for our coaches if the local regulations require that. We've requested it for parents if the parents feel comfortable with that, if they're visiting the facility. But in terms of the players, again, the parents may want the child to have a mask. And again, we're not going to say you can't. If they feel more comfortable with that, so be it. But it's not something we generally said wear a mask. We did say it for coaches. And then the equipment things and the sterilization of the environment becomes key. And a lot of that's common sense. But whether it's, and you almost go back to the kind of setting of how you would set up a organization for equipment, less traffic, less movement, less transition, keeping groups together. So a lot of the kind of camp world lends itself to this lens, but it's definitely, and my hope is that depending on where you are, we don't need to apply some of this, because by the time the fall actually hits, it may be more open, but in the reality, depending on where you are, it could be just opening up. So it's a moving target for all of us.
Yeah, but I think you've hit on something there with the compartmentalizing of the coach's day almost, isn't it? It's before I leave home, as I arrive, as the children arrive, as the practice starts, ending the practice, watching the children leave. Yeah, it's a different world.
It is. And the other part of it is, okay, it's great for us to put out suggestions and we update our microsite weekly, daily, whatever, there's major changes. The other factor is, again, from a nationwide perspective, we can put out a handbook and that's good, it's got guidelines, but how do we actually educate the coaches to deliver this material? There's a different, plus, what is a great commitment to coach education, but it's a bit of a challenge now, is that AYSO, as you guys know, is mandated coach certification back in 2010 or 2011, which was a great commitment to training volunteers. But now we have certain we have to have people qualified and go through training in order to be on the field. So that's another element that we've had to address, and we're doing that, but it's not easy, whether and I know you're looking at the same thing, but how do we deliver potential classroom sessions that weren't online modules, but deliver them in this setting, a Zoom setting, and it's not just a matter of taking that PowerPoint, as and saying and clicking through it. you know, we've taken one course, which is a kind of really a bread and butter course, which is the 12U age group, and we've revamped the whole thing for virtual delivery as a test. And when I say a test, we're testing the delivery of every slide and trying to vary that and engage the uptake and the educational piece, still sticking to the same, you know, methodologies that we would do for any adult session. But whether it's, you know, an overview of the slide, whether it's guided questions, cold calling, breakout rooms, group returns to presentations, and, you know, we're using Kahoot for online quizzes to make that, you know, kind of got that idea from you, Ian, because I remember when you presented an online effort for the grassroots, you know, you went to sleep late one night and come back with a whole course built, which was exceptionally creative. But just getting as innovative and then test each method of delivery. We've got embedded video with guided question review after the video, so that we just get some type of engagement with the on-field piece. But like we were talking about earlier, the on-field piece becomes the, you know, the missing part. You can't replicate it, I don't believe, in a classroom, in a virtual setting.
Yeah. Now, we do have a question from the box. Thank you. So the question is, do you anticipate some clubs skirting the rules, looking for a competitive advantage during the different return to play phases, scrimmages, friendlies, etc.?
Yeah. I'm going to be very naive and romantic and say I hope not. Right. And I honestly feel, as few of you know, because I feel that there was a lot of, you know, collaboration between the agencies prior to this this outbreak, and there was a lot of respect and discussion had. I would hope that nobody's going to look at this as an opportunity to gain membership and you know, by lessening their restrictions. But if we're realistic, we saw that became a strategy when the PDIs came out. Similar scenario. You've got new restrictions, new guidelines. We're all on the same page, but come over to my field because we're playing, you know, 11-a-side with 4-year-olds.
Yeah.
So because that can resemble the game to certain parents. So I hope in this scenario, culturally, because it's a health and safety concern, that's not the case. But I don't know. And in terms of what we expect from it, you know, we have to trust their judgment that we're, you know, from a health and safety standpoint, this is a guideline and a recommendation, and it's and you know, hopefully there's a respect to that. The other element that we have is AYSO United, which is a club program that competes and operates in state circuits, so external, whether it's US Club or USY, and they have to align with their standards as well. So it's difficult, but I would say if anything, right now entities are erring in this. I'm hoping they're erring the side of respect for the children in general, not looking at it as a competitive advantage.
Yeah,
I will say, Scott, I like that response, even though we all snickered. But there's a couple of responses you've given. One to the rewriting of that particular curriculum.
Yeah.
So improving the virtual delivery, and then just the simple notion, not that we didn't used to do it before, where we would give a coach a training session and suggest them variables. But you actually said we now see this as a way of empowering these coaches and equipping them. So a lot of your responses have actually been positive responses to the challenge, as opposed to doom and gloom. And I think that's something we've been talking about a lot over these last 3 months, is there's an opportunity here to be better at what we do when we come back.
Well, that's got to be the hope, that if we look at things a little bit differently, we may get, you know, more positive results than we expect. I think again, I don't want to be overly naive here, but I tend to think that this is an opportunity for the industry or the game in this country to have a bit of a reset.
Yes.
I feel, and this is a personal view, that we've lost our way a little bit. I think the divide between competitive and elite performance sport and participation or grassroots was getting further and further apart. And I don't think that's an overall healthy dynamic for the growth of the game or for what the game was designed for. I think if we look at it from I don't think, another thing that we're doing even on this same topic is we've designed alternative play models. So if a region that we have who normally has, 10-week season, full teams, uniforms, 11v11, corner flags, the whole thing, assistant upon assistant, snack shop, parents, everything. We're suggesting if you can do that, great. But if you have other issues like timelines or restrictions, we're suggesting why don't you look at other models such as futsal, whether it pickup nights, skills nights, alternatives to this that basically give an opportunity for a more organic and free-flowing environment. And again, I'd love to say we think that's a better model going forward. But this has been a catalyst to that. But I think, as we all know, having been in the game, that type of over-organization and over-structure and mechanistic approach to play has resulted in what we have today. We're not increasing numbers. We're not developing any more real talent. Got talent, but it's not the creative. By now, we should have 5 Lionel Messis, right? So there's a connection there. But I think if we start to provide a little bit more free play for the players, less structure, less control, more pickup style, again, more organic, to me, that there's a very, very large market for that from a behavioral and social standpoint. And I think if we haven't marketed that, and we haven't celebrated how important that is to the game. There's definitely the need for all of it, but we've kind of swung the other way to the apex of the pyramid. And I'd like to think this might, due to circumstances, re-energize the grassroots for the game in this country. That's what we're hoping. And I think we'll create, and by doing that, we'll get a kind of, from a player standpoint, we're going to create a much freer environment and a canvas for creativity and freedom. And I think out of that's going to come more fun and potentially more creative, innovative type players. So
yeah. No, I was just on a call with someone. We were talking about college athletics reforms, right? And due to COVID, now colleges are reshaping like their schedules, for example, right? So they're not taking flights. They're not going to take flights anymore. They're going to travel locally. They're going to, play more zip code, like Ian put in the chat box. Maybe now we're going to have less travel due to this, and people will have more common sense when they talk about putting kids in cars when they're 7 to drive 3 hours one way, right, to play a game. I never forget when I talked to Bobby Clark one time when I was the state director of coaching in Indiana, and I told him that was happening, and I said, "Can you give me some advice?" And he said, "Yeah, tell them they shouldn't travel more than one way than the length of the game."
Yeah.
And I said, "Wow, that was pretty impressive." And he was God, right? I mean, he's revered, and so that helped. But unfortunately, not everyone got the message. But no, you're right. I think this has been a really, from what I'm hearing, this is number 105 webinar. Is that I think we are having a reset or a reboot, if you will, and we're kind of taking a look inward, and and a lot of things in a lot of ways. So we've taken a lot of your time. I know Ian has to jump off, but and you've been very gracious from taking time away from your best team, which is your team at home. But Mr. Mully.
Yeah, I just not to belabor the point, but I see it more of a leveling of the playing field as opposed to workmanship.
Yeah,
because everybody's in the same position locally.
Yeah.
So those that will try the unwitting stuff behind closed doors really are not able to get away with it because everybody is undergoing the same kind of procedures.
Yeah. Right.
So it doesn't work in your favor to put children in harm's way, does it?
No.
Yeah.
Great.
So maybe I'm romantic too.
The other leveler, well, we know you're a romantic, hopeless romantic, Mully. But the other leveler is finances, right? I mean, there's no question there's a financial impact on most families, most organizations. So it depends now what where you can put your value to a $2,000 a month club soccer program versus $100 for a season. So it depends.
Yeah, no, you're right. So just to end, Scott, in closing, so Mully, Massachusetts, they put some outstanding new lesson plans up, right? As far as coaching and COVID, and outstanding. And can people go to AYSO's website and get that information? Because I'd like to see how you do it with 5 to 8-year-olds. I like to see that.
It's all in there. We on our at AYSO volunteers.org, we have a microsite in there, and you go to education, coaching, and they're all there free. That's enough. Everything we have is available. So it's all on our website. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Scott. Thank you so much for being on. And boss, I'll see you later. Mr. Mullliner, thank you so much. It's always a blessing for us to see you.
I don't know about that. You're very welcome. Scott, great to see you. Great to see you.
Thanks, guys.
So real quick, so tomorrow we have the day off. It's a recovery day for Ian and I.
Wow.
And Thursday morning, we have a young lady who is from the state of Indiana, but she's playing for Espanol. Yep. So we're going to have her on, and I'm looking forward to that one. So, so anyway, but thank you all so much. Scott, thank you again. And everybody, please be safe. And thanks, Ian and Ian, for being on.
Thanks, Ian. Thanks, Scott.
Good to see you, gentlemen. Be well.
Thank you. Good to see you too.